Welcome to Maverick University, an educational series featuring ministry modules taught by ministry-minded Christians and designed to help Christians become more effective in their service for Christ. Welcome to another edition of Maverick University. I'm your host, David Hallberg. Joining me today is Brother Todd Oprzedek. Brother Todd is an evangelist and camp director based out of Kyte River Revival Campgrounds, and you can find all of our conversations with Brother Todd in the description below. You can click on those links and find out about our other topics. The topic for this episode will be building construction. And so, Brother Todd, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And there's a lot to be said about the camp ministry, a lot of different facets of it. A lot of people think the camp ministry is, starts when the campers get there, obviously.
Yes.
That has a lot to do with it. The games, the fun, the activities, the preaching, and all that goes into it. But then you've got the logistics of, we need to build a new building in the camp off season. And
yes.
So, we're going to be talking about the things you've learned, mistakes made.
Sure.
What things you've learned about construction.
I love first when people come to me and they say, "Well, Brother Todd, you have camp during the summertime? What do you do the rest of the year?"
Yeah.
Almost like, your pastor only preaches on Sunday morning and then they're off the rest of the week, right? That's the premise people have about people in ministry sometimes. But there is the preseason, and then there's the season of camp, and then there's the postseason. The preseason is taking buildings out of the state of winterization. We have a lot of them, the lines blown out, so nothing freezes over the wintertime. So you're putting plumbing fittings back together. You're connecting things again, faucets, and finding out what broke and what has broke. And when you get into a week of camp, and I've said this jokingly to another camp director before, but I feel like sometimes I have a whistle in one hand to play a game, and then in the other hand in my back pocket is always a wrench, So I feel like I'm doing both all the time. And, I'm in the middle of a game and then something explodes. I have to go fix it. And so there is a lot that happens. Sometimes I wonder, am I the maintenance guy or the camp director or the activities director? But it all falls under that same category. But at camp, in the 15 years that I've done camp work, we've built a lot of different buildings. At Cedar River Baptist Camp, which we have owned for 10 years, we started with a lot of renovations with a property that had been just sitting vacant for many years. So we gave a lot of facelift to a building.
Yeah, what kind of problems did you face?
The property had sat for, I think, 4 or 5 years unattended, and so when we turned on the water, pipes had burst everywhere. And so we fixed one plumbing leak, then we turned it on. Then another part would leak, and it just went on and on and on and on. There was hundreds of leaks that had happened because things were not winterized properly. There was a group in there that took possession of the property for a short period of time, and they didn't winterize it, they left. And so it was just a nightmare. So I had to learn very quickly how to sweat pipes, how to glue, what is PVC, what is CPVC, the fittings that go with it, because we had a plumber from our church that came out to help, but he lived 4 hours away. So if there was something that went wrong, it wasn't, "Hey, can you come help me? By the time you get here, everything's going to be flooded." Yeah. I kind of had to know the basics on plumbing, and that was one of the immediate needs right away. But on top of that, then all the construction that went along with it. So as we got into Cedar River Baptist Camp, we started with drywall projects, putting a new siding around buildings. We had to figure out what had happened with the pool in 4 years and how to keep a pool going and the chemicals to balance it and everything that went along with that. And so it was quite a learning process, and I'll say to this day, I'm still learning. I haven't mastered any one of the building trades, but I like to think that I can have at least some knowledge in every one of those. You don't just call a repairman. I mean, just for them to show up on your property is going to be north of $100 most of the time before they even do anything. So that's just not feasible for a ministry that's trying to stretch every dollar. And we're trying to make good use of God's money in that. So therefore, we're going to have to learn how to do things ourselves.
So obviously your resume wasn't filled with all this construction knowledge when you first started out.
Well,
what sources did you use to gain this knowledge?
Well, to some degree, I had minimal experience. I'd bought a house and before that, and it was in disrepair. And I remember walking in the first day, my brother and I bought it together, and we're so proud of this place. And we said, we're going to do some repairs, some renovations. I'd say we'll probably be in here in about a month. Why you're laughing? Because
I know.
It took 8 months before we ever moved in there.
Oh, wow.
And we gutted the house. Gutted it. We did HVAC work, which we hired out. We did drywall, insulation, mudding, taping, painting, totally gutted the kitchen, new appliances, new cabinets. I mean, you name it, we did it. Windows, everything. We had a shell of a house by the time we were able to start rebuilding. So in doing that project and working with my dad through different projects, I'm so thankful for experience I got in that. But there will come times where there's some things I don't know how to do. This last week at the camp, I was wrapping exterior ductwork in insulation and a weatherproof jacket. If you were to ask me how to do that a couple weeks ago, I wouldn't have a clue. And so I had to research all of the material we would need, the proper installation of that, and then the HVAC guys are not available all the time to come help me. So guess who's doing it? I volunteered. So I had to do it. It has to get done before winter. Yeah. So it's always good to have a list of contractors, whether they can help you or not, that they're at least available for a phone call to say, how can I do this? I want to be able to do this. And you don't want them to get the idea you're using them and that you're not willing to do it. You roll up your sleeves yourself and do it. So I want to ask them, okay, what's the right process? Then I'm going to double check that process to make sure it is the correct process. I'm going to add a multitude of counselors. The Bible talks about that, and it's so very important to make sure that the right decision is made, because we're dealing with God's money, and I want to make sure I'm spending it wisely, that I'm not wasting it. And so then on top of that, we just can't be afraid to jump into a project and try it. You can't just say, I've never done that, I can't do that. Well, we have a great amount of knowledge at our fingertips with videos online now. You can find a video on how to do pretty much anything. And if you just take it, click step by step, okay, I've done the first step, pause, okay, now the next step, watch it, rewatch it. You'd be amazed what you can learn if you're just willing to roll up your sleeves and get dirty.
Yeah, so any young man who's maybe a teenager, don't pass up on opportunities to work with your hands, work
Absolutely.
with a man in your church who's a tradesman of some sort.
Yes.
And if you're even as an assistant pastor in the church, don't ever be afraid to say, no, I never. Don't be afraid to say you've never done something before.
Right.
But then volunteer to try to learn it and do it.
A story comes to mind just on that note. I had a young man who came to camp, and he came from a home where he just had his mom. He was raised with his mom. His dad was not in his life absolutely whatsoever. And he lacked in the ability to do construction projects and the knowledge in that. The first day he got to camp, we were doing siding on the side of a garage. And I told him, hey, grab those nails, and I want you to nail in this siding. I want you to do it this way. And he's learning. He takes that first nail and he went like this, and to hit it, and he missed, and it bent, and it went everywhere but in. And he was getting frustrated with himself because he's seeing other guys do it right, and maybe they had a little more experience, and they were a couple of years older than him. And he threw the hammer down, and he says, I can't do this. I said, pick up that hammer, and I said, take these box of nails, and right next to us was a 6x6 post that it was coming out of the ground. I said, I want you to practice driving this nail into the post. And he did it, and he worked on it. It took him like a few minutes to get one in. Yeah. I said, good, now do another one. Was it beneficial to me? Not at all. But I saw a determination in him, and I saw him like trying, and he didn't give up. And at that point, I said, you know what? He might not have all the experience, but I know I can I can work with this young man because he's not giving up. And he drove probably about 30 nails into that post. And by the end, he worked on staff for 3 summers, and he is now in Bible college at Providence Baptist College, training for the ministry. And I have no doubt in my mind that he'll keep going when times are hard, because I saw that determination in him when he was just a teenager. And at his high school graduation, before we left Cedar River Baptist Camp, I cut off that post with all those nails in it. Mm-hmm. And for his graduation present, I wrapped it up and gave it to him. And he opened it up and looked at it. He probably didn't even remember what it was. And I said, I don't want you to ever quit. And I told him the story. And he still has it to this day. But he wasn't afraid to learn. And that's a kind of attribute that a young person needs.
Well, yeah, all the resources are out there. You're talking about, YouTube, watching videos. I remember buying my house and having to roof my house a week after I bought it. It was in such bad shape. And literally, that's what was happening. I was on the roof with an iPad, watching a YouTube video, pause, all right, oh, okay. And then I keep doing that until I get to a point where, I don't know what to do now. Watch more of the video.
And a lot of times,
crazy.
A hurdle like that you've never come across, it may seem insurmountable, and you can't even fathom getting past it. But now that you have that skill, you'll be like, no problem, I can do a roof again. Now, do you want to? You got the knowledge to say, nope. I don't really want to.
Never again.
But you've got the wisdom and the knowledge to say, yeah, I know how to do that if I need to, know? And just another arsenal in your quiver, if I could say it like that way, to...
What are some examples of some...
round you up.
What are some examples of some buildings that you've constructed at Kyte River, even back to Cedar River?
Cedar River Baptist Camp, we built a pavilion, a fairly large picnic pavilion. Mm-hmm. We built a concession building. We sided a garage. We hung a lot of drywall. We built 11 different family cabins. And when I say family cabins, 1-room hotel-style buildings, a house contained within a small space.
So it's not just a building, you're plumbing, electrical, running water.
Every bit of it,
yeah.
Yes. And some of that we hired out to some degree, but then there came a point where we had to do it ourselves and finish it ourselves. We got some of the buildings, we put the shells up. We had a company come in and put the shell up. Then we finished the inside. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot in that I had to figure out myself and work through obstacles. The blueprints don't always tell you everything, and I learned that the hard way. When just this past year we finished a dining hall project at Kyte River Revival Campgrounds, 10,000 square foot building, and it valued and appraised for $1.2 million.
Okay.
And we have $550,000 into it, so we have $650,000 of equity or so in the building. Why? Because we did a lot of the work ourselves. But in that, we hired out an architect. I think we spent $13,000 on architectural blueprints of the building and all the schematics, all the MEPs. I didn't even know what MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing.
Oh, okay.
And so mechanicals, MEP sheets, and blueprints. I'm looking at these things. I'm like, I do not know what I'm doing here with this. And then came the hard questions. All right, where are we putting this hood? How do you balance the flow of air coming into the building versus coming out, so you don't have a negative, room with a negative draw? I didn't even know what a negative draw was.
Yeah.
And there were so many times in that building project, I want to go back to the architect and say, I want my money back, because your $13,000 did not cover half of what we had to do. Yeah. You just got to figure it out. It's either, I can't do this, you throw down your hammer and walk away. No, that's not an option. You've got to figure it out and solve those problems. And life is made up of obstacles. The difference between you and the next guy is when he wants to quit, when he's going to give up, versus the guy that doesn't quit. He might not be the smartest, might not be the most talented, but he's got the determination not to quit when hard times come.
You're talking about the equity that you have in this dining hall, and obviously we save some money somewhere, doing the work ourselves, but also there's probably some contacts that you've made of people that may not necessarily be Christians themselves, but they have a heart for a Christian ministry and they want to help in any way possible. Can you talk to us about some stories of people that have come in and saved the day and helped out the camp ministry?
So the dining hall building, I'd drawn in the main entrance coming in. There was a hall coming in that led. There was a kitchen on the left-hand side, bathrooms and offices on the right, and then it led into the dining area. Well, I wanted that to really kind of stand out a little bit more, put a little more thought into the design there, because it was beginning to be a lot of traffic flowing through there. And I really wanted to add some rustic barn wood to this hall coming in. Well, one Saturday I was leaving the camp and I was driving out the front of the camp, and there was a neighbor who was tearing down a barn, and he literally had the dozer touching the building ready to push it over. And I went up to him and I said, "Steve, hey, I'm building this building back here, and I was wondering if I could maybe take some of the barn wood, if you're just going to destroy this, and take some of this barn wood and use it in our building project." He goes, "Todd, you've been a good neighbor. I don't have to tear this thing down today. I'll wait till Monday or Tuesday if you want to come and pull out some boards and use them at the camp." I said, "Thank you very much. I'll be here Monday." Monday morning, I got a crew of guys together. I mean, you got to strike while the iron's hot. If someone's going to give you something, you can't wait. And we went up in those rafters and began throwing stuff out of those rafters of this 100-year-old barn that had been sitting there forever. I mean, you wouldn't believe the crud and the filth that was up there, and pulled out these beautiful old rustic boards. We took them back to the camp. They still didn't look very good at all. We power washed them down, stained them, and I put them in the hall of the camp there. And it was just a wonderful thing to see God provide and be able to make a connection with the neighbor as well. And every time he comes up to the camp, his wife's aunt used to own that property. And he says to me, "Todd, you know what? It just does my heart good to see that you use some of Dorothy's old things at her barn," and that was her name. And Aunt Dorothy passed away, but it's like she still lives on almost, because you've taken some of this stuff and used it in your building, and it knitted our hearts together, and it made him feel good to be a help in this ministry, in this camp ministry, for future generations. And he said, "You know what? I really don't like to waste stuff, so I'm glad you're able to use that." And he'll tell me that almost every time he comes to camp. And he said to me the other day, he said, "Todd, I always loved living around here out in the country, but sitting on my back porch during the summertime and hearing the church people," that's what he calls the people at camp, "hearing the church people singing, it's like a little piece of heaven out here." And God has used that man to be a blessing to the camp. And he's actually working at the camp today, mowing auxiliary fields with a big brush hog mower of his own, that he just wants to be a blessing to the camp. And he's going to be planting some crops in the spring. And he said, "You know what? It's not all this we're going to use for crops, but I want to make this place look nice. So when your church people come, they know we're taking care of it." He's taking ownership in this place, and it's not even his. And it's just amazing, time after time, where God brought us up against an obstacle that we thought couldn't be solved. And then he said, "If you're going to just show some persistence in this, I'm going to bring a blessing your way." And I could tell story after story with HVAC equipment, with doors and windows and people that provided. When you're just, if you're a person that sits back and says, "God, when are you going to bless?" He's not, more than likely, he's not going to bless in that scenario. He wants to bless someone that's actively working and using what talents they have, although they might be small, and for him, and then he's going to grow those. There's a man in the book of Exodus. I think his name is Bezaleel. I might be pronouncing it wrong, but he was instructed to build the contents of the temple, and he was instrumental in all different trades. The Bible tells us he knew how to cut diamond stones or precious stones. He could sew fabric. He could work with his hands in building wood, the altars, and all this different things. And I draw such inspiration from him and say, "God, I want to be like him. I might not know all this, but I want to be able to have that ability to use those talents in the ministry."
Well, I guess the lesson learned from this conversation basically is there's going to be things that God puts in your path, some tasks He wants you to do that you don't necessarily know how to do, but just plow ahead and learn and overcome some obstacles, and God will enable you to do that.
That's right.
Thanks so much, Brother Todd, for talking to us. You can check out all of our other conversations with Brother Todd in the description below. You can click on those links, and I hope you'll enjoy. Thanks for watching.